everyone, welcome to the subject History of Pentecostal Movement. Before going to the topic, let me ask what things first comes to your mind when you hear the word Pentecost or Pentecostals. Growing in a traditional South Indian Pentecostal background, I used to think Pentecostals are the ones who don't wear ornaments and often wear white dresses to the church and don't watch movies and follow other strict lifestyles. Later, I moved to bigger cities and came in contact of different Pentecostal churches, and my understanding about the Pentecostals began to change. I believe you might also have your own ideas or assumptions about the Pentecostals. In this course, we will explore the historical and theological background of the movement and its impact on contemporary Christianity. We will also look into the biblical foundation of Pentecostalism, the distinctive teachings of Pentecostalism, the rise of classical Pentecostal revivals, and its influence on contemporary Christianity. First, let's look into some of the facts about the Pentecostal charismatic movements. The Pentecostal movement constitutes the fastest growing groups of churches within Christianity today. It has begun to influence not only mainland Protestant churches but also the Roman Catholic Church. It is the second largest family of Christians in the world after the Roman Catholic Church. This movement is found in almost every country in the world. Peter Wagner of Fuller Seminary writes, "In all of human history, no other non-political, non-militaristic, voluntary human movement has grown as rapidly as the Pentecostal charismatic movement in the last 25 years." The Harvard theologian Harvey Cox predicted that 21st century belongs not to the secularists but to the Pentecostals. The Anglican theologian Alistair McGrath writes about the growth of the Pentecostal charismatic movement. The charismatic movement is the most rapidly growing element of Christianity today. Pentecostalism in its various forms is now the largest single Christian group apart from Catholicism and outnumbers the sum total of all other forms of Protestantism. Accurately estimating the global number of Pentecostal Christians is challenging. However, Alistair McGrath noted that there were at least half a billion Pentecostals by the year 2000. By 2015, researchers like Todd Johnson and his colleagues estimated that number had grown to approximately 643 million. Today, it is believed that nearly one-fourth of the global Christian population can be broadly categorized as Pentecostal or charismatic. Now let's look into the biblical foundation of the Pentecostalism. Now let's look into the Bible to understand the root word Pentecostal. The word Pentecost in the Old Testament, now we will study. It is very important to understand what we mean by the term Pentecostal and charismatic. The word Pentecost comes from the Greek word Pentecostus, meaning 50. Pentecost is the Greek name for the Old Testament festival, the Feast of Weeks. It is described in Leviticus 23 verses 15 to 21. In verse 51 it says, "From the day after the Sabbath, the day you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, count of 7 full weeks." In verse 16, "Count of 50 days after the day after the seventh Sabbath, and then present an offering of new grain to the Lord." Verse 21, "On the same day you are to proclaim a sacred assembly and do no regular work. This is to be a lasting ordinance for the generations to come, wherever you live." The Feast of Weeks was celebrated 50 days after the Feast of Passover. The Feast of Passover was celebrated as thanksgiving offering to God for his protection. The Feast of Weeks was a harvest festival. It marked the beginning of the time when the people brought their offerings of first fruits. And it was one of the pilgrimage festivals for the Jews. And the Jews had the three annual pilgrimage festivals. First one is Passover, second one is Tabernacle, and the third one is Pentecost. And it was also called as Feast of Weeks because God told the Israelites to count 7 weeks and a day from the first fruits offering. Leviticus 23:15 it says a count of 7 full weeks. Deuteronomy 16:9 and 10 says count of 7 full weeks from the time you begin to put the sickle to the standing grain. Verse 10 says, then celebrate the festival of weeks to the Lord your God by giving a free will offering in proportion to the blessings the Lord your God has given you. It was a festival of joy and thanksgiving celebrating the completion of the harvest season. And after the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed in AD 70, Jews celebrated Feast of Pentecost to remember the giving of the law at Mount Sinai. The day of Pentecost in Acts was significant because it was 50 days after Christ's crucifixion and resurrection and 10 days after his ascension into heaven. Acts chapter 1 verses 2 to 3. On this day, the Holy Spirit was poured out upon the believers gathered in Jerusalem. This fulfilled the prophecy in Joel chapter 2 verse 28 that says, I will pour out my spirit. The day of Pentecost resulted in a spiritual harvest. 3,000 believers were added. The day of Pentecost is traditionally recognized as the birth of the church as an institution. In Acts 2, the Jews gathered in Jerusalem to celebrate the festival of Pentecost, also known as the Feast of Weeks. As a pilgrimage festival, it required Jews from various regions to come to Jerusalem for worship. It was on this festival day the Holy Spirit came on the believers because this outpouring occurred during the festival of Pentecost. The term Pentecost became connected with movement Pentecostal.